Right, okay, we're going to make a start on this sheet and work through each exercise. So we're going to start first with wet on wet. So I'll pick a colour. I'm going to use a bit of red here. Get it nice and wet so that all the paint comes up into the brush. Make sure there's lots of pigment on the brush. You just check it every so often. Swirl that round, really pick up all that pigment. Okay, hopefully this is fine. Let's have a go. So wet on wet. Gonna make a nice wet section here. And then that's my wet, and now I'm going to do wet on top of the wet. So I'll pick another colour. And get that nice and wet. And then I'm going to go over the top just to see what happens. It's all experimentation. So, yeah, it's quite soft. There's no harsh lines. It's quite blurry. Yeah, that's wet on wet to that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so it's soft lines. Nothing too harsh. Okay. And again, just you can either fill the whole square or just do a circle. And so that's nice and wet in the middle. You can see that shining on there. You don't want a puddle. You don't want too much water. I'm hoping I haven't put too much here. But then also if you don't put enough on it, then the colour doesn't bleed either. So let's give it a whirl. So I'm going to pick up some pigment. I'll start with my red. And then I'm just going to drop it in here. There you see, I tapped that and you can already see the colour bleeding out. I'm going to put a bit more down this side. I'm just sort of poking the colour, I'm not sweeping it across, I'm just poking it in. And then that gradually bleeds. You can see that bit's bleeding, then there's also this lighter pink that's bleeding out. But I'm going to bleed a second colour into that one. So I'm going to get some yellow this time. So I'm mixing in my slightly dirty brush with the yellow, so it's making a bit of an orange. And then I'll just drop that in next to it and see if those bleed together. And again, I'm just sort of dabbing it, I'm not pushing it around. Yeah, that's kind of bleeding a bit, and you can sort of agitate it to move around the water. And then let's just put some blue in as well. I'm doing all three primary colours here, but really I could do, actually I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to, instead of putting blue in, I'm going to put a different, so I've got yellow and red, I'm going to put a bit of orange in as well. Keep them all quite warm and fiery colours on this one. And there we go, just letting that, poking that about a bit, pushing it about and letting that bleed in to there. And you'll notice that it only bleeds as far as the wet circle that I did in the first instance. It's not running out, it's staying within that wet section. Okay, so that's quite nice. And then you could agitate it further. I could use the other side of my brush just to pull the colour around a bit. Just play around with it and see what happens. Don't muddy it up too much. If I keep poking that about, it's all just going to end up being a big blobby like mess, one colour. So I'm going to keep it separate a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to try wet on dry. So that is literally just my paint onto dry paper. So I use blue this time, nice and wet. So we do want plenty of water. Mix it around, get all that colour up there. And then I'm just going to use wet on dry. I think I'll do a little circle so it's very easy to control when it's wet. Nice and smooth. I might as well have another practice with another colour since I'm on this box, wet on dry. I'll use some orange this time. Complementary colour. And then I'll just run that in there as well. So yeah, so wet on dry is quite easy to control. You get very definite lines, whereas when we did wet on wet, it all blurs together, but this is very separate. Okay, so the next one on this strip is the dry brush. So it's the same again, like I'm just collecting the ink up off the blue, but this time I don't want it to be really wet. So I haven't added any extra water to this. I put a damp brush on here, but the brush wasn't particularly wet. I'm going to mix that up, get lots of pigment, but I'm not going to add any more water, so it does feel drier. It's still shiny, but there's no paint running around. Okay, so that's fairly dry. Let's see if this is dry enough, if it creates like the effect we're after. Yeah, that's it. So it's a dry brush. It's sort of a bit more textured. Play around with that as well, different directions. I like, if you're limited on brushes, you can also like sort of splay the hairs out like that, and then that might give another effect, like a wider brush. I'm going to try some narrow lines as well. That's quite fun, so just have a little play around with it. Then the last one's the graded wash, so by that I mean a gradient going from either one colour to another colour, like yellow to red or yellow to orange, or I could literally just go from red and then until it gets lighter and lighter to just white. I think I'll try that first. I think I'm going to give that a go. So I'm going to use red paint, get it nice and wet there, and I'll try and get a gradient going with this. So start there, that's quite pigmented, and I want it to get weaker and weaker, but I'm going to have to wash a bit of this pigment off the brush now, so I'll just dip it in the water and then drain excess water off it, and then I'm going to keep going there. See, that's a bit less colour, and then again I'll put my brush in the water, drain off any excess water there, and then I'm just going to finish off down here so that again is lighter. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. If I did want to go grade like colour to colour, then I could just start to add yellow, and I could go from the bottom here, and then I could start to meet up again back in the middle. I need to take some pigment off my brush when we get to the middle. There we go. So that's a colour to colour. That's fairly good actually. It's it takes a bit of practice. I've done half a box there because I think I might be tempted to have another go down this side. But that's up to you. You can do what you want in these boxes. Okay, so have a go with those ones first, and then we'll move on to the next section. Right, so we are going to be using some different techniques here. Some resist techniques, some masking tape. So this is the masking tape one. You literally just need a tiny piece of masking tape. Rip up some little pieces and just arrange them on this square. If you had more time, you might want to cut out particular shapes. You might cut out like neat triangles or strips, but this doesn't matter for this exercise. We're just going to put these patches down. Right, and then once you've done that, get your paintbrush, mix in the colour that you want to use. I accidentally used a lot of red. I'm naturally drawn to this red. Make sure it's not too dry, so I'm going to add a bit more water to that. So I'm going to do like a wash of colour over the top. Right, so I'm just going to go over the top of it like that. Okay, and just leave that to dry, and we'll come back to that one once we get to the end of this strip. Okay, so the next one's dripping. This one is quite fun. I always think, and you need a lot more water than you think you're going to need. So I'm going to drip some red. So I'll make a little splodge there. And then I think I'm also going to drip some blue. And again, I need quite a bit of water, because otherwise it just won't. Oh, I think I've done too much water there. Oops, you seen that? It's flooding. It's flooding. Right, and then I'll put a little bit on that one. The blue one hasn't. So I'll add a bit more in that one. You really do need a lot on here. So anyway, like I say, you can experiment with it and see how you get on. So that wasn't too successful, but the red one was alright. It's gone down over this box, but that's fine because that says lines anyway. So that's not a big deal. Okay, the next one's just a fun one, fingerprint. So I might mop up a bit of this excess blue that I've done here. I literally just put my finger in there. And then just, oh, that's too watery, I don't like that. Right, so I'm going to use a drier one now. I'm going to use the red, because there's not as much water in that one. This should look a bit better. That's better. So I can actually see my fingerprint. I think with the blue, there was just too much water there. Okay.
And just mix it up. Try different ones, just fill it all up with little fingerprints. There, yes, that's quite an easy one, that's fun.
Right, Wax Crayon Resist. This is a great one, I love this one. So, you can do anything you want. You can do heart circles, your name, you could write your name. I think this is quite a nice way of doing bricks. I used to think when I had to paint a house, I would think this would save me time. So I'm going to do brick lines, but you can do anything you like. This is your page. I'm hoping when I fill this in, it'll look like bricks. And you'll see what happens, which we did discuss. Okay, so I've done my little brick lines. You can kind of see them in the shadow there. Yes, you can see them. Right, so I'm going to use like orangey, yellowy, red colours, like brick colours for this. So get my paintbrush, get some water in these colours here, and I'll give it a little wash. Let's see. Oh yes, that's worked. Okay, and then I'll pick up a little bit more. I'll try a different colour, try a bit of orange now, mix it up. There, just so it's got like more of a brick effect. And then I'll try a bit of red just to finish that off. The red might be a bit too harsh, to be honest. It doesn't look very brick-like, but you can see what I mean there. So that wax is resisting the water, and the water's running off the wax. So my brick lines have come through, and that's really cool. I love that. Brilliant. Okay, so have a go on that strip now. I've left a blank box here so you can experiment again if there's one of these you want to try again and do it here. While we're here, you can see what happens now with this. If we peel off the tape, you can see it's left the white gaps. What's quite nice to do if you've got the time is to take these off and then put some more on over the top. So I'm going to do that quickly now while I've got you on here. So I've got some more masking tape and I'm just going to randomly lay these on again. Okay. There we go. And then I'm going to put another wash on the top. So then you end up with like layered colours. Make sure they're pressed down nicely. Right, so this time I'll do a yellow. And I'm just going to go over the top. There we go. And then when that's dried, I'll take it off and then hopefully it'll be a nice layered effect. Okay, so have a go at those ones. Practice in that end one if you want with something that you particularly enjoyed. And then we'll start on these next ones after. Okay. Right, so this one's a fun one that we're going to do now. The bubble wrap one. Get your paintbrush, a bit of water, find a colour you like. I'm going to use blue. I'm still trying to mop up all this excess blue paint that I made before. It can't be too dry though. It has got to be, you know, like nice glossy wetness, but not too wet and not too dry. Okay, then we're just going to rub a quick wash over the top of here, and then you have to act quite quick with this. Grab the bubble wrap that you've got, so the bubbly side is facing upwards here, and you turn it over, bubble side down, press it on, and then lift it off, and you see it leaves this little imprint. Yeah, so it takes away some of the paint and leaves the little bubble effect there. Next one is lines, and that's literally all it is. Okay, so I'm going to use some red paint. I want you to practice with thin and thick lines, and then also doing a line that goes from thick to thin as well. So I'll show you here. So do Practice some nice thin lines, wonky lines, wiggly lines, whatever you want. Fat line. And then also starting your line thin and pressing down to get fatter, then easing off again so it's thin and then pressing down again. Yeah, so you're alternating the thickness of that line as you go. That's quite a good one to use. I'm going to try it again. So it's pressure and no pressure. There, okay. So that one's quite an easy one as well. Just practice with your lines. And then after that one, we have the tissue dab, which is exactly what it sounds like. So I'm going to use a red wash here. Put it on quite quick again. And get my tissue scrumpled. And then I'm just going to dab. You can dab particular areas or dab the whole thing. I'm just going to dab little sections there like that, you see. So it lifts some of the colour off and adds texture. Okay, and then this last one is the fun one that everyone likes, is the splatter. To do the splatter you need quite a bit of water in your paint, but obviously don't go crazy, but it needs to be wet, otherwise it won't splat. This is quite messy, so take care. Hold the brush directly over the box that you're going to splatter and just gently tap. It might go over some of your other boxes, but that's not the end of the world, okay? There. And then I'm going to just do a little bit of red splatter on top of that as well. Super fun, this. Right, see if I can get some red off here. There. Got to flick it quite hard, like tap it. You can see how my finger and my hand is. I've got it held like this, and then I tap it like that. Yeah. Okay, and then once again I've left a spare box at the end here, so you can practice one of those techniques that you liked and try it again here, potentially with a different colour, different shapes, okay? And I'll just bring us back to this masking tape one. When we put the second wash on, I'll just peel those bits off and you'll see you've got some nice layering now of colours and white space. Yeah? There we go. Okay, so you've got your own nice sheet there. Write your name across the top. Practice 2 more that you like here, or invent your own if you can think of anything. And then we'll discuss these different techniques afterwards and how we can use them in paintings